We have a very interesting slate on tap for week number 3 in NFL DFS because we have two very obvious games to stack, some potential value at running back, but also we have to decide whether that value is actually worth it. So let's dive on in and get you set for week number 3. Welcome on into the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire. That's right here on the FanDuel Podcast Network and numberFire.com. My name is Jim Sotis. I am a senior writer and analyst for numberFire.com. Joined here, as always, by Brandon Gadula. He is the managing editor for numberFire. Brandon, week 3 coming in hot. How you doing?
I'm good. I'm already a little frazzled, though. I won't lie, because like you said, there are two games that are super stackable, and then there are a whole bunch of games that kind of look the same. Last week, I said we could cut off like the bottom 5 because the top 8 looked really good.
This week, the bottom 12.
I mean, you can't just play. You probably can just play these. Are
you sure? Tempted.
But I mean, sifting through these other games, and I did a trend on like the betting information for these other games, and I can't really rank them yet. It's so hard to differentiate these.
And the other thing that's hard too is like the two games are so obviously the best two games that it's harder for me to justify not just loading up on them. But at the same time, like everyone else is going to do that too. I think there are ways you can go at those games without necessarily just following the crowd entirely. And like that's my main goal, I think, in this podcast is try to find ways to get exposure to Lions, Cardinals, Cowboys, Seahawks without just being the default lineup. So I think we can do that. So we're going to dive on in and break it on down. But first, as always, we have 2 weekly NFL podcasts here on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. Those are posted on the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed after. But if you want to watch them live, head over to the FanDuel YouTube page. We are recording live 9 a.m. on Mondays for the recap podcast and, of course, the preview podcast 10 a.m. on Thursdays. So make sure you subscribe to the FanDuel YouTube page and also to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed. We also have PGA, NASCAR, and UFC podcasts pretty much every week, so make sure you're subscribed there to get all of your DFS information. Also, our listener league is back for week number 2, running it back, or for week 3. Ooh, okay, we're slow. Running it back for week number 3. Get yourself entered now. Just a $5 entry with a max of 3 entries. But the best part of all, there is no rake. FanDuel gets no money out of this contest. It all goes back to you, the listeners. That's what you want if you're trying to maximize profit in DFS. The $5 entry fee also lets players of all bankroll sizes get in on the fun and compete against fellow listeners. To enter, check out the Week 3 podcast preview post once it's up on numberFire.com. There is a link in the description there if you're watching on YouTube right now and want to enter yourself right now. You can go to the Week 2 recap podcast that has a link to the listener league there as well. You can also go directly to it by going to FanDuel.com/league/listener league, FanDuel.com/league/listener league, FanDuel.com/league/listener league. Or again, just go to the podcast post on numberFire and click that link. Eligibility restrictions apply. 3 entries max, $5 entry, no rake, giddy up. The big thing for me, Brandon, on this week, we mentioned the game stacks already. We talked a little bit about that. But the other thing is, which of the injury fill-ins have the upside to justify use? I think those are the 2 big things for me on this slate, trying to decipher which of the running backs have the upside we need and which of the games we want to stack potentially outside of those 2 games. What are the big things standing out to you on this slate?
I think those 2 are probably the 2 biggest questions. And then the third close behind is kind of what to do at wide receiver. We have DeAndre Hopkins. And then, we have some other good wide receivers, Calvin Ridley, Julio Jones, all of the Seattle and Dallas guys. But really
literally
kind
of them, yes.
Yeah, but
you're not even exaggerating. It's very true.
But it's not a week where it's like, is it Devontae? Is it Nuke? Is it, Julio this week? It's very different where we have one superstar wide receiver. You can maybe put Calvin Ridley in there, but he's overperformed a lot despite having fantastic usage as it is. So I always kind of downplay what I'm doing at wide receiver in favor of picking the right quarterbacks and running backs. I think I need to take a much closer look at wide receiver this week to pinpoint which guys stand out the most.
And I think that it's tough too, because like you have the stackable guys, the guys in the game stacks. Like, we talk about Kenny Galladay coming back. We've got DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, all the Cowboys receivers. But then you also have guys around them who are interesting from a usage perspective, but they're not in games that are as fun. Keenan Allen specifically comes to mind for that. We've got, Allen Robinson is intriguing always. So it's hard to figure out, do we want to, like me, the question when I was filling out my first lineup was, do I go with another receiver in one of the high scoring games, or do I take the usage route with guys in less enticing games? It's a pretty tough question to answer for this slate. So let's dive on into some injuries here for the week 3 main slate. The 49ers, everyone's hurt. Nick Mullins probably going to start for Jimmy Garoppolo against the Giants. Jerick McKinnon and Jeffrey Wilson Jr. will get, it seems like, most of the rushing work. Also be without Nick Bosa, Solomon Thomas, and Dee Ford on the defensive line. The only positive here is that George Kittle got in a limited session Wednesday, but if I'm making a bet right now, I don't think George Kittle plays because they were so mad about the turf in Jersey. So I kind of think they're doing it without everyone. So, Brandon, how are you viewing this 49ers team heading into week 3?
Yeah, this is the lowest totaled game on the slate. Backup quarterback, just kind of decimated. I don't think you have to play any 49ers this week.
It's weird because when you go to FanShare, Jerick McKinnon has the most tags of anyone by a significant margin.
And we didn't even start yet.
Right.
We love Jerick, but...
Jerick this is a pro Jerick podcast.
We love Jerick long term. I don't know if we love him this week.
We love Jerick, the NFL player. Do we love Jerick as a DFS play? Bigger question. We're going to talk about upside at running back in the trends discussion. He will be a part of that discussion there. The Giants signed Devontae Freeman. Speaking of upside, Brandon, they signed Devontae Freeman with Saquon Barkley going on injured reserve with his torn ACL. So Devontae Freeman, Dion Lewis, Wayne Gallman in the backfield. Are you using any of them in week 3?
If you ask me between 3 running backs, if I'm using any of them, that is too many running backs for me to want in a backfield to have to figure out. In DFS, this is not season long. You're not looking for some volume. You're not limited. You can play any running back on the main slate. I don't see it. And again, this game is not going to be that good.
I agree. Justin Herbert will get another start for the Chargers this week due to Tyrod Taylor's punctured lung. They're hosting the Panthers. How are you viewing the Chargers pass catchers here, or are you looking at the running backs? I guess we could ask that too.
Well, the Chargers are favored by 6.5. They're at home. That's kind of the running back checklist. Again, there are 2 of them between Austin Eckler and Joshua Kelly. It was a 57-52 split in terms of snap rate last week. I think I prefer the pass catchers, and if I'm preferring a pass catcher, it's going to be Keenan Allen. But Mike Williams is a high ADOT guy at home. You brought that to my attention that's kind of when you want to use high ADOT guys in relatively close games. So I think I'm more on the pass catchers.
Yeah, I think that we talked about this in the preview podcast or the recap podcast, but they just get such good usage and where the high leverage targets are going that they're pretty intriguing. Joshua Kelly, similar to McKinnon, where I think people are going to wind up being a lot higher on him than I am. He did get 3 targets last week, which is good, but it's also important where that game went to overtime. I don't know what percentage of Kelly's touches came in overtime because I know they punted, so they didn't have a ton. But I'm not projecting him to get 23 carries again, I think is the way that I'd put this.
Yeah, so I wouldn't either. Even though this is the right game script. He could get a lot of carries. Sure.
Yeah, after Teddy gives the Panthers a 3-touchdown lead, I'm sure what could possibly go wrong with Teddy Bridgewater against a great defense. The Broncos will be without my son Drew Lock and no Cortland Sutton this week. Jeff Driscoll, the Bengals' former number 5 wide receiver, will start. Phillip Lindsay seems likely to start or to sit again as well. So, are you in on any Broncos in their matchup with the Bucs, or is it just the Bucs defense?
This is kind of one of those games that I didn't even dig into. It's one of the lower total games on the slate. I don't like backup quarterbacks and how they affect an overall game because this game could just get ugly. So I think I'm just out.
Just remember that the Bengals literally moved Jeff Driscoll to wide receiver last year. That happened. Bucks defense is a pretty good option. I would be interested in KJ Hamler and Jerry Jeudy, but I just don't know if they'll score enough points for me to get there. So I think I'm on board with you. Leonard Fournette, mildly interesting, given that he did get a lot of work last week and no one's going to use him compared to like guys like McKinnon and Mike Davis, but he would be very much like a rotational guy, not even a fringe core guy, just like a rotational guy. But the Bucs defense really solid against the Bengals. From former number 5 wide receiver Cam Akers missed practice Wednesday with a rib injury. Malcolm Brown didn't practice. He's got a finger injury, but it sounds like he is in line to play. The Rams get the Bills this week. Let's assume that Akers sits, but Brown plays. Would you check out Darrell Henderson against the Bills?
Again, if there are 2 running backs, I don't love that. I like this game. It's one of my favorite game stacks, although I'm still wavering on how I rank all the game stacks outside the top 2. I would play him in game stacks. Again, for anyone who doesn't know my process, which is probably everybody, I have for a running back specifically, there are usually about 4 guys, maybe 5, I consider in a cash game or like a single entry lineup. Everyone else is just a tournament play / a game stack play. So I would play either of these 2, whoever's healthy really, in a game stack in this specific spot. But outside of that, I'm not going to take a chance. So that's usually how I feel about a lot of committees. That's how I feel about the Rams committee for this week.
I think because Henderson looked so good last week, I would put him in game stacks too. I agree that probably not going beyond that, just because like he could get 10 carries and 2 targets, and like, where's the fun of that?
Yeah.
But I like that game too. And I think that because he looked so good and looked like it was like he was on fast forward, whereas Malcolm Brown was at like 0.5x speed, like listen to the podcast stuff. I think I would be intrigued by Henderson if Akers sits. If Akers plays, it's tougher.
Did you say like a podcast?
Yeah, because like you can listen to him on like 1.5x speed. You go to, I think they have 1.2 on Spotify as well.
You said 0.5, and I just hope you're not listening to them at 0.5.
No, I'm pretty sure that option's available.
It is, but it would be a very Jim thing for you to listen to them on 0.5 so you don't miss it.
There's also 0.8 if you want to go that. Okay. So
on Apple Podcasts, I think it's like on my phone. It's like
imagine listening to podcasts on Apple. Come on, get out of here. Pro Spotify podcast. The Colts will be without Paris Campbell, who is on IR with a knee injury. Jack Doyle missed another practice with a groin injury. So let's assume Doyle sits. Are you in on Mo Alley Cox, T.Y. Dusty Hilton, Michael Pittman here, or is it just Jonathan Taylor?
I mean, it is Jonathan Taylor. My biggest concern is that Indianapolis won't have to throw. This feels like one of those. Oh, Phillip Rivers had 23 pass attempts, and
Jonathan Taylor had 103 carries.
Yeah, so
for 1,000 yards.
if I believed at all in the offense opposite the Colts this week, I would be open to Mo Alley Cox, potentially even Michael Pittman, but it feels like a 5-target, 6-target ceiling for anyone in this offense.
I think that because the ceiling for tight ends in general is so low, I'm okay with going with them in less game stacking conditions. So I think that
just Mo Alley Cox, right?
Yeah. So Mo Alley Cox, like, I think despite the fact that it's not a stackable game, I could get there. Yes. But like, if we're looking at the running back landscape this week, I think that Jonathan Taylor needs to be in your top 3, just given where his salary is. Like, I think to me, like, I know, like, if I have a single entry, I know my running backs are going to be Zeke, Jonathan Taylor, and Miles Sanders. And like, that's maybe Kenyon Drake, but like, Jonathan Taylor's in that top 3. He's going to be in like 60 to 70% of my lineup. So I'm just going to go with him. Occasionally Alley Cox. I think that's where I'm at. Yeah.
I mean, you summed it up. Like, that's just the way that I think about running backs is, are you one of the like 4 best plays? And if not, my only interest in you is like if I'm stacking up a game and hoping that you get 2 touchdowns.
I agree. The Jets, speaking of which, will be super shorthanded again this week. Shocker. Brashad Perriman and Jamison Crowder missed practice and are expected to sit. Is there anything salvageable here? You going to Chris Hogan or Braxton Berrios? Do you want Chris Herndon's 5 targets for maybe 6 yards?
No, I'm not chasing Chris Hogan. Not chasing Braxton. I'm out.
Yeah, you need to score tutties. I don't know if they're capable of that. I know the Colts defense is not as good as the defenses they faced thus far, but I don't care. Looks like the Lions should get Kenny Galladay back this week. He was limited in practice Wednesday. We'll talk more about them in the trend section. On the other side, Christian Kirk missed practice Wednesday with a groin injury. Let's assume that Kirk sits. Would that alter anything for the way you view the Cardinals, whether it be viewing Kyler Murray or DeAndre Hopkins, Andy Isabella, Dan Arnold? Would it alter other secondary pieces for you?
It might lower me a little bit on the offense as a whole, but not enough to worry. Kirk gets a lot of downfield work. If he plays, I like him as a pivot piece to a game stack because high ADOT guy at home, good matchup. So I think my only real change if Kirk were out is that I would be a little bit less into the offense, but that's about it.
Yeah, I'm not sure he matters enough for me to be super scared, just because Isabella can be that deep guy with his speed. So I think
Twitter knows
on his 3 routes. But I think I'd still be even with Kyler. It would just it would change around other things. Like Dan Arnold. Let's go. Julio Jones missed practice Wednesday with a hamstring injury. He was limited all last week, and Dan Quinn said the injury may have hampered him during the game, like on that the drop touchdown from Russell Gage. What are you thinking about the Falcons here as they face the Bears? Because I feel like we haven't talked a lot about them, or the DFS sphere hasn't talked a lot about them this week.
Wait, the DFS sphere?
Sphere, S-P-H-E-R-E.
Okay.
Sorry. It was I morphed those words together.
This is a game that could be interesting because for a game to be interesting to me, both quarterbacks have to be viable, and I'd have to consider using either of them in DFS. Trubisky's been league average in terms of numberFire's expected points model in terms of efficiency. So that gives me enough reason to be in on the Falcons on the other side. Calvin Ridley's usage has been pretty phenomenal, 24% target share. He's been overperforming, but he's been getting red zone, end zone looks. The salary of 8,000 puts him into game stack only territory. I think even if Julio were to miss, I could be a donkey there, but for an extra 500, I'd really want to try to get to DeAndre Hopkins. So I kind of like this offense. I like Hayden Hurst at 57. I've been struggling with Atlanta's offense this week, though. It would be a huge bump to Russell Gage, I would assume.
Yeah, the problem is if Julio sits, that downgrades the entire offense. So,
which is what I was saying with Christian Kirk, but it's not the same level at all.
Are you saying that Julio Jones and Christian Kirk are not the same player? Can you confirm?
I can confirm.
There are sections of Twitter that probably think that Christian Kirk's better than Julio Jones. So I don't know. Maybe
a lot of people hate Julio, but
they do.
I'll never hate Julio after his Instagram picture with him and the squirrel.
Forgot about that. Thank you. The Eagles, speaking of deep threats, have lost wide receiver Jalen Reagor due to a thumb injury. Going to be out for a bit, it sounds like a while. That hurts this offense with one less field stretcher. How are you viewing the Eagles against the Bengals here?
Okay, so I'll talk more about this game in a minute with trends, but the offenses look terrible. That much is certain. It worries me. NFL Research, I think, was the account. They tweeted out a lot of Carson Wentz stats and his completion rate over expectation on downfield throws, and
isn't he literally dead last in CPOE?
He
or near there. No, he's last in expected points.
Well, he's last in expected points, but he's I think second to last behind or above Haskins.
The NFC East is a fun division.
Yeah, it's tough because I like this game a little bit, just because it could be a little chaotic, but the offenses aren't really what you'd want them to be, and that always, again, I need to like both quarterbacks to get in on a game. I just like the tight ends, I guess, and Miles Sanders, obviously.
Yeah, I think that Goddard is in play for cash. I think Miles Sanders is a cash game. He's top 3 for me for sure. Deshaun Jackson, I think, is a good pivot off of like CD Lamb because people probably won't go back to Deshaun. He's guaranteed to get, like, if you can give me 8 targets to Deshaun Jackson, I'm okay if he busts. Like, that's fine. He's not going to be as popular this week. So I think Deshaun at $5,500 is a really good play. High that guy at home checks those boxes too. So Deshaun, Goddard, Miles Sanders. I am not going to mention the other tight end on this team. I'm done. I've given up. I used him last week. Should not have. Like a big old idiot. Not doing that again. A.J. Brown missed another practice on Wednesday. So it seems like he might not play again this week. The Titans face the Vikings. Are you going to Jonnu Smith, Corey Davis, or is it all about Derrick Henry here?
So I joked on the recap podcast that I think I made this joke. Maybe it was just on Slack, but I was like, will they get to like 80 combined plays here? It just feels like a game that won't be very filled with fireworks, but it's the 3rd highest total on the slate.
I don't get it.
And like I just said, I need to like both quarterbacks to stack a game as much as possible. You couldn't pay me to play Kirk Cousins in DFS right now. So
I mean, you could pay me. Like I'll take free money. Like
I have my dignity.
What?
I have my dignity.
I have no dignity.
So with this game specifically,
I gave up my dignity a long time ago.
With this game, like Adam Thielen has an amazing workload. Dalvin Cook's not really the Dalvin Cook of old. So like, I don't know who on the Vikings you would feel good about rostering outside of Thielen. I'm not saying Dalvin Cook's untouchable. If you're stacking this game up, he's going to be part of it. It has to be a Titan stack with Vikings bringbacks. I'm just going to be lower on this game than apparently consensus if that's where the total is.
I think Derrick Henry is a very good tournament play, despite the fact that no one has hurt me more from a bankroll perspective than Derrick Henry, whether it be using him when I shouldn't have. But the good thing is he'll be less popular this week off the dud, so I think he's a good tournament play. I'm not like I understand that it opens up more targets, and I understand that it's like an elite matchup for Jonnu and for Corey Davis, but like Jonnu's 56. It's not like he's like crazy cheap. Like Dallas Goedert's $400 cheaper. Corey Davis, 53. Okay, never mind. I can go with Corey Davis. He's 53. That works. But like so it's Derrick Henry and Corey Davis, but that's about it.
Yeah, so it's like, and maybe if you throw in Jonnu again for a game stack because you're banking on there being the touchdowns, but it just feels like it's, well, I don't know. This is like a mini stack because I don't really want either quarterback, and maybe I'm just eternally too low on Ryan Tannehill, but I feel like a Henry Thielen mini stack throughout like other game stacks is probably the right way to do it.
That's fair. I could get on board with that. Let's move on to our trends discussion for week number 3. We're trying to keep some broad trends here to give you an overview of the slate. Brandon, your first trend is doing exactly that. You are looking at the non-Dallas, Seattle, and non-Detroit, Arizona games, trying to find which ones we can stack there. When you look into it, what stands out to you?
Yeah, so we have 13 games in the main slate, which is a lot. It's 26 teams. 10 of the 13 games have totals between 43.5 and 48.5 as of Thursday morning. We have those 2 shootout games, and then there's the 49ers and Giants, which is now 41.5. So kind of like 10 games to me that we have to sift through and differentiate. So I went through and looked at the betting action on each of the games according to OddsFire, which is a free tool from numberFire that shows you line movement, betting trends across myriad sports.
Listen to this company guy.
Oddsfire.com will get you there. Using that, I found the games with the highest percentage of tickets on the over, just like outright bets, which I think will show us the most popular games. The top game there is New England and Las Vegas with 86% of the bets on the over. Pittsburgh, Houston, Philadelphia and Cincinnati, and Buffalo and the Rams are all above 82% as well. So those might be, if you're just trying to get like a snapshot of the most popular game stacks outside of the top 2, those 4 might be it. But New England and Las Vegas is the slowest combined game by situation neutral pace. And only 48% of the money is on the over in that game, which is the biggest discrepancy between betting tickets and percentage of the money on and over. So that game might be one where I'm fine missing out a little bit. The most popular games by money on the over are Philadelphia and Cincinnati, Pittsburgh and Houston. Arizona and Detroit is actually in there despite the high total already. And then Cleveland and Washington, which are all above 83% of the money coming in on the over. Cleveland and Washington is the best situation neutral pace matchup on the board. Both teams are top 10 there, according to Football Outsiders. And if you look at discrepancy between between money and tickets bet on the over, you can kind of get a feel for, that's the quote unquote sharp money or smart money. You can see where the heavier investors are differentiating from the field. The games that stand out there are still Arizona and Detroit, Cleveland and Washington, Minnesota and Tennessee, although with that game specifically, only 47% of the money is still on the over, so it's kind of half and half, but it's not as popular. So I think you and I are both lower on Minnesota, Tennessee than the total says. We're not alone in that. And then Philadelphia, Cincinnati also fits that bill. A lot of the money coming in on the over there. So if you're looking for a game with good pace, good betting action on the over, it's Cleveland and Washington, which didn't really jump out to me at the start. So I just want to kind of throw that out there. I think this is a good shortcut to see which games could be popular, which games are getting the attention of the bigger bettors. And among the top two or the non-top two games, I think my three favorite game stacks right now might be factoring everything in, differentiation, ways to stack. I think number one is Buffalo and the Rams. There are more tickets than money on this one, but I like the offenses. They both are playing really well. It's kind of easy to stack for me. Cleveland, Washington, I think, jumped to number two. I think it's really easy to figure out the right targets. Terry McLaurin, Logan Thomas, and then Odell Beckham pretty much on the other side. It might be more of a mini stack game for me. But I will play some Baker Mayfield because I still believe in Baker for better or for worse. And then I think three, again, factoring in everything, might be Philly, Cincinnati, because the offenses aren't great right now. The defenses also aren't great. Philly is 8th in situation neutral pace. We get downfield targets, kind of know where to go. We have running backs that we can play here too. So I'll probably change this a lot, but right now I think those are my top three outside of the top two shootouts.
Yeah. I agree with you on Rams Bills. I think that one's pretty fun. I know, shocker that I'd be in on a game that includes Jared Goff, but the Rams, a very high situation neutral pace. I think they are 8th there. The Bills aren't as high in situation neutral pace, but they are throwing the ball a ton on early downs, which can lead to good paces. So, I'm not fully in on Josh Allen because he hasn't faced any competent defense yet, but I like the way they're playing things. So I think that I will definitely have Josh Allen lineups, I think, on Sunday.
I think you have to.
Yeah, I agree. I think despite the fact that he's facing a better defense, I don't know how much matchups matter for him because of the rushing. When he's facing a tougher opponent, he can just run more. So I think that Allen works. I probably won't get to Goff, but I know. But it's a Robert Woods revenge game. He gets Tre'Davious White most likely. So I will probably wind up with more. Again, this is also treasonous for me. I'll probably have more Cooper Kupp than Bobby Trees. I know. The Bills have had a lot of injuries at linebacker. I think Tremaine Edmonds was back in practice in a limited fashion on Wednesday, so he might be good to go. But that could be advantageous for Tyler Higbee after Mike Gesicki just absolutely throttled this team. Higbee is 61. That is a lot more than I'd like to pay. And in a vacuum, I prefer Hunter Henry at 6,000. But if people aren't going to be on Higbee and if he works for a game stack, I can get there. So I think that's my favorite. I actually kind of like Houston-Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh's defense is amazing. Is that any different than what Houston's faced so far? Will Fuller was not on the injury report on Wednesday, which I think is huge.
Wow.
The fact that he was not limited, he was full go, not even listed. So I think Will Fuller is in a really good spot, and stacking him with Deontay Johnson or Juju Smith-Schuster, both missed practice on Wednesday, but they did that last Wednesday too, so I'm pretty sure they're fine. But I think a Will Fuller and then either Deontay or Juju stack works really well. Trying to find Deontay here. Deontay is $6,300. Will Fuller is well below that. And the reason you fear this Pittsburgh defense is because of their pass rush. I care way more about pass rush when it comes to quarterbacks than receivers. So I can get to Will Fuller even if I don't get to Deshaun Watson. So I kind of like that one at number 2 personally. James Conner's mildly interesting. I don't want to. Mildly interesting though. And
I don't hate David Johnson either. He's not getting the work, but he's on the field a ton.
Duke got back at practice on Wednesday, so I think the snap rate will come back down to like 70-ish%, but that's still fine. So I think that's number 2 for me. Number 3 is probably Cincinnati, Philadelphia. I mean, I just respect the Washington defense a lot, and that lowers me on the Cleveland-Washington game. I like it from a pace perspective in the sense that it makes me higher on the Cleveland defense because it's more play volume, which is good. I could see an Odell Terry McLaurin mini stack or an Odell Logan Thomas mini stack, but I think it's just mini stacks there. So I would say definitively for me, Rams, Bills, Steelers, Texans, and then Bengals, Eagles for me.
Yeah, I was saying that I really want my stacks to be such that I have exposure to both quarterbacks. I don't know how many games outside of the top 2. I like all 4 quarterbacks in those top 2 games. I don't know of any other games where I will have
both quarterbacks. Might not either.
The most likely one would be probably the Bills and Rams. Or
most likely for me is Steelers Texans because I can see myself using Deshaun Watson. But.
Yeah, I just don't like Ben Roethlisberger, but
it's a very fair stance for a lot of reasons.
But yeah, Deshaun is just getting it tough with all these schedules. If Will Fuller's fully healthy, like that's fantastic, but there's a lot of risk there. So it would be very limited exposure to each of those quarterbacks. Yeah,
I'd have to have a lot of lineups to get there. If I have like 10 lineups, I'm not going away from those top 2 games. It'll be just 10 lineups of those 2 game stacks. But if I have more, I could see myself getting to both. I do want some Josh Allen for sure if I'm doing more than 10, but it's a weird week for sure. We'll talk more about those 2 games later on. But first, let's talk about those low salaried running backs because with all the injuries, we've got some lower salary guys who could be in play on this slate. Specifically, we got Mike Davis on the Panthers, Jerick McKinnon or Jeff Wilson on the 49ers. The Giants guys could all be on the map this week. You can put Joshua Kelly in here. It's not an injury, but like it's kind of a similar situation. And Leonard Fournette. But we have to make sure these guys have the upside to justify using them. And to get a gauge on this, we can lean on past perfect lineups and see how many points a value play needs to score to make it in a perfect lineup. You don't need a perfect lineup to win a tournament, but like it can give us a good gauge on what upside is necessary for a player to be in play. We'll look at 2018 on. That is the time when FanDuel has had the flex spot. Lets us jam in 3 running backs per lineup. So 2018 on. First, it's important to note that not many super low salary backs make perfect lineups, which is noteworthy by itself. But since the start of 2018, 94 running backs have made a perfect lineup, and only 14 of them had a salary lower than $6,000. So there aren't a lot of random dudes who come out of nowhere. Normally it's the studs who wind up in these slots. So we will expand the sample here a bit and look at players with salaries of $6,400 or lower who have made it. That gives us a sample of 30 running backs from 2018 through week 2 of this year. None of those 30 running backs scored fewer than 22 FanDuel points when they made the perfect lineup. If a running back doesn't have a path to at least 20 FanDuel points, I don't think they should sniff a FanDuel lineup. I'm not sure if that's being too rigid, but that's the line for me. Like for wide receivers, it's 85 yards or 2 touchdowns. For running back, I need 20 points or else no chance. On average, those 30 running backs have scored 28.1 FanDuel points. The median is 27.8. So it's not like it's a couple of big performances that are jacking this number up. You just need a lot of points if you want to be a great running back play. This is done via a combination of both rushing and receiving work. Those perfect lower salaried running backs have averaged 100 rushing yards per game and 45 receiving yards per game. That's 4.1 receptions per game. All the backs who were $6,400 or lower who made it had at least 1 reception. there were 8 running backs with there were 8 running backs with at least 6 receptions, which is more than the number of backs who had just 1. There were 5 of those. So you're more likely to get there with 6 receptions than 1. So I think we can learn a couple of things here, 3 things specifically. The first one is that most of the running backs in perfect lineups are guys with established roles and high salaries. Which is why in this house we spend up at running back. Number 2, you need a lot of points, even out of a value back, to truly move the needle. Like, again, you can get by on 12.5 points, but the odds you win the tournament go down a lot. You need to nail every other spot in your lineup if you do that, whereas if you get 18 or 20, you have a lot more wiggle room. Third, they probably need passing game work to make that happen, which to me makes Mike Davis the best of the lower salary backs. He had 8 targets last week and figures to get a lot of targets this week, filling in for Christian McCaffrey. I think he has a path to 20 points. He is $6,000. That's $700 less than Jonathan Taylor, $1,400 less than Miles Sanders. So the offense isn't great, facing a really good defense. I'm highest on Mike Davis of this bunch, but he's not going to crack my top 4 at running backs. I put Kenyon Drake ahead of him too, and honestly, like Derrick Henry's there, so like he might not even be top 5. Where do you sit on these lower salary guys? Are you higher on any of them than I am? What are you seeing here?
It doesn't sound like you were high on them really at all, for the most part, and I think I might be less in on them.
Okay.
Like,
I won't push back on that, so you're good.
Like realistically, I understand how they're enticing, but one thing jumps off the page to me this week is if you're spending down at running back, you are spending up at either tight end or wide receiver, and I don't really see the point of that. Like, I love DeAndre Hopkins. I think he's worth prioritizing and getting to, but it's not like it's, well, I'm going to play Hopkins, a healthy Devontae Adams in a shootout, and like Julio Jones or anybody else, Michael Thomas. Like, it's not that kind of week at tight end. George Kittle's not 100%. Darren Waller. I think we should probably talk about like the Raiders offense more and where we think the Patriots defense will like they always try to stop the top option. That's like the narrative. Like, are they just going to limit Darren Waller? I don't know. So spending down a running back doesn't really get me anything this week, or not as much as it could.
Yeah. So like value's good, but value for the sake of value is not good.
Right.
And
at a certain point, value becomes irrelevant, and that's why you play Christian McCaffrey when he's like healthy, because you get the value elsewhere, and then you can plug in Christian McCaffrey, who doesn't need as high of a points per dollar threshold because he can get a floor of 20 FanDuel points.
Right. From a points per dollar perspective, if you want Jerick McKinnon to pay off, you need 3.5x probably. I don't know. I guess I don't like. I don't like. What are the odds? You actually might have this in your simulations, but what are the odds that Jerick McKinnon scores 20 points?
So this is before updating it from. I'm gonna have to bump him down for the Jeffrey Wilson news.
Yeah,
I have him at about 18%, which puts
20 points. 20 points.
Yeah, because that was projected for like a bigger workload. I'm gonna have to bump that down. That's like a top 16 rate or so. That's going to drop probably pretty substantially, honestly.
What about Mike Davis? Because you actually have these numbers, so I should take advantage of this.
Again, these aren't fully audited, but he's at like 5%.
Really? Okay.
Yeah.
So where will Mike Davis like wind up ranking for you? Like
in a like out of my tournament projections, and he's not like 5,000. He's 6,000.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying $700 or $500 in salary is nothing, but like Kenyon Drake is 65, Jonathan Taylor 67. I just don't understand the logic behind saying I'm going to play Mike Davis instead of finding 500 to get to Kenyon Drake. We do this in golf a lot, but this week you could be looking at Mike Davis and DeAndre Hopkins versus Kenyon Drake and Calvin Ridley. And that's like not even a contest to me.
Yeah. Yeah, Drake is number 4 for me, so I think I'd agree with that sentiment.
Like again, in a week, if this was Travis Kelce in a shootout and Lamar Jackson was like 98 and like the smash spot, I get it. It's just not really that kind of week. So
yeah.
I'm not chasing the value here.
I do think Davis is worthwhile just because of the targets, and I value targets so much. Like if he gets 8 targets again, which he got in like the second half last week, the odds he pays off are pretty high. And he has I think to me at least, a pretty easy path to 20 FanDuel points. So in that sense, but he's not going to be above Derrick Henry. He's not going to be above Drake, not above Taylor, not above Sanders, not above Zeke, not above Chris Carson. For game stacks there. I forgot to mention Chris Carson before. Yeah. So like Mike Davis is at least 7th to me. And like I might not even get there. So I think we're on the same page here. I might just be a tiny bit higher on Davis. Let's move to your second trend, looking at wide receivers who have gotten good usage in the first 2 weeks, but have not converted on said usage. And some of them I think are really fun plays for this week. So talk to me about that and what you see here in week 3.
Yeah, this one's also kind of a broad trend too, because I think it's important to figure out what you value. Is it more who's converting or like who's getting the opportunities? Is it a little bit of both? And this week's pretty wide open at wide receiver. We've already mentioned that. So I wanted to take a deeper look at the position than I normally do, so I can figure out where I want to be overweight in tournaments. Obviously, I'm still going to stack up those 2 big games. But outside of that, I mean, I'm not going to be 80% invested on a single wide receiver because the position's way too volatile for that. But, through 2 weeks, we have some solid data. And if we look at per play and per snap numbers, we can see like who's on the field. Those things stabilize more quickly than just per game stuff. And if we look at things like within targets, such as like if it's downfield or not, if it's in the red zone or not, we can get a good idea of usage and expectations. And there's been a lot of expected points, like expected fantasy points stuff that has emerged this year, which I love. And I've messed around with it a lot. It's just important to keep in mind. Those explain what should have happened. It doesn't necessarily mean that usage will continue, and it doesn't even mean that somebody will make up for all of that, by the end of the season. So just keep that in mind. But using nothing more than targets and air yards, you can predict receiving FanDuel points pretty well. And I spent a lot of time this offseason trying to figure out breakout games and what indicates a breakout game is coming, if it's underperforming. And nothing really emerged over a larger sample. It was a lot of anecdotal stuff. So keep in mind, we don't know who is going to convert the big plays. So we should at least feel good going after the opportunities. And if we do that and look at the opportunities and not who's converted, nobody has underperformed more from a receiving standpoint than AJ Green, who should be averaging about 16 FanDuel points per game, but is at 6. He has 8 downfield targets, which is tied for second most in the league. He has 2 red zone targets. His salary is $5,900 against an Eagles team that is currently 32nd in adjusted pass defense based on numberFire's metrics. I mentioned that as a game that I like to stack. I'm going to be pretty in on AJ Green this week. The next biggest underperformers are Allen Robinson. He is $6,900 against the Falcons, who are 30th against the pass, according to numberFire. Deshaun Jackson, $5,500 against the Bengals, who are 20th. T.Y. Hilton at home, which is always something we have to consider, at least still, unless you think T.Y. Hilton is complete dust.
Yes. Sorry. I had to clear my throat. I should have turned my mic off. I meant to turn it off. I turned it on accidentally. Yes. Dust. Sorry.
Eternal regression candidate, Mike Williams, whether that's positive or negative, 5,700 at home against the Panthers, high ADOT guy at home as well. Evan Ingram, I can't get in on him, but I love Evan Ingram's usage. DJ Moore, Logan Thomas, and Christian Kirk if he plays. But I think that's a lot of interesting sort of volatile plays in mostly promising spots, especially at wide receiver. I've already kind of talked about what we're looking at the top of the receiver pool. It drops off pretty quickly to a lot of guys who are still very good, but not necessarily on the DeAndre Hopkins level. So I think we can easily get swayed on which wide receivers have converted so far. Like, it feels really scary not to play a lot of Calvin Ridley at 8,000. His use, if you look just at his expected points based on his usage, it's still fantastic, but he's overperformed a lot. And if he doesn't score, multiple touchdowns, he might not pay off an $8,000 salary. So I like looking at kind of expected workloads. So guys like Green, Still Ridley, Hopkins, Amari Cooper fits the bill, DJ Moore, Stephon Diggs, Deontay Johnson, Russell Gage is very interesting, Allen Robinson, Julian Edelman, Keenan Allen. I think I'm going to take a stand a little bit and say I want to target some guys who have really good roles but haven't converted because wide receiver seems pretty wide open, and I would rather just chase the volume than the actual production so far. So what are your kind of initial thoughts on wide receiver this week?
Yeah, I think that I am very okay with taking stabs at the guys who've underperformed because it's a 2-game sample.
Right.
Like, maybe the matchups have been tough. Maybe it's been weird situations that have led to incompletions. Like, there's so much variance in one throw in the NFL. And, Allen Robinson is the guy at the top of that list. He's had 18 throws go his way this year. Like, you don't expect the performance to stabilize across 18 targets. So I fully agree with you. Like, we should go there. Allen Robinson, I think, is one of the tougher guys for me because I really like him straight up. I just value game environment so much, and it's not my favorite game environment. So straight up, I love him. Same thing with Keenan Allen. Amazing usage so far this year. 8 and 10 targets. He had 97 yards last week with Justin Herbert. So he has a path to a really big game, and I value that so much. So I think that Keenan and Allen Robinson are at the top of my list. I would say Deshaun Jackson is at the top of my list for the lower salary guys, around $5,500. I adore that. Logan Thomas, I know the reason that he's underperforming is because of his quarterback, but he gets to face Cleveland, who let up 16 targets to Drew Sample and CJ Uzomah last week. Cool. I'll take. They lost Joe Schobert in free agency, so I said free season. That's weird. I think that Logan Thomas works. So I would say among the guys who have underperformed, I am most in on Allen Robinson. Keenan Allen wasn't on that list, but he's kind of in that. He's under 10 FanDuel points per game, so I put him on that list too. Deshaun Jackson, Logan Thomas. Those are the guys I am most in on targeting on that list. You had to pick one. Who are you going with?
Probably Deshaun, and then at that rate, I think the regression stack of the week is AJ Green and Deshaun Jackson. Okay. They're both very affordable on FanDuel in terms of their salaries. So you can kind of stack up a lot if you go with those two. One name I will throw out, and I don't really focus on him or prioritize him a lot, but I mentioned him with a great workload. Apparently, it's a really good game environment. But that would be Adam Thielen.
Oh, okay.
He's
I'm excited for Adam Thielen's 40% target share, which equates to 4 targets.
Yes, I'm just saying if we believe in that game and the 48.5 point total, we gotta take a look, right? Also, he's had 8 targets in both games so far.
Sure he has. Sure, buddy. Sure. Yeah, he's fine. I don't want to do it. I really don't. I love Adam Thielen. I hate that offense. So it's tough. Let's move on to my second trend, which is focusing on the Lions offense with Kenny Golladay being back. Because it sounds like he will be. Adam Schefter reported on Monday that he'd be back, which we can be scared about guys coming off of injury. When it's reported Monday that the dude's going to be back, my level of confidence in them goes up quite a bit. That level of confidence is good. He also apparently was close last week. Limited practice Wednesday, so I'm assuming that he's pretty close to full health, and he comes in a great spot where they're on the road against the Cardinals in a situation we want to stack. So that's good. It also forces us to reset our thoughts, not just on Golladay, but also on the entire offense. And luckily, their personnel is pretty stagnant from what it was last year once you add Golladay back in. The Lions last year played 6 games, which all of Golladay, Marvin Jones, and Danny Amendola were healthy. I lopped off a game where Amendola played, but I think he left due to injury after playing 33% of the snaps, so I did not include that one. But in those 6 games, Matthew Stafford averaged .30 passing net expected points per dropback. That is a top-tier number. He also went deep 25% of the time, which is an elite number too. So they were a vertical, efficient offense, which is what we want to see. In those games, Golladay had just 20% of the team's targets, but he also had 33% of the air yards and 38% of the deep targets. He had 100 or more yards in 4 of those 6 games. Didn't have a great floor, he was very volatile, and he figures to be volatile this year too. But I would love to get in on Galladay immediately after the injury, assuming he gets into full practice by Friday. Marvin Jones's overall target share was at 19.5%. Didn't get as much deep work as Galladay, but he was a monster in the red zone. He had 29% of the red zone targets. That was in addition to 23% of the deep targets, 24% of the air yards. He had 2 100-yard games in there. He had another game with 93 yards and 4 touchdowns. So Jones will be more volatile than Galladay, and Galladay is volatile too, but he's $6,100. I love that for full game stacks, and I'm happy to have him in mini game stacks with DeAndre Hopkins, Kenyon Drake, and Dan Arnold as well. TJ Hawkinson and Danny Amendola, tougher sells for me because they didn't get the high leverage targets. Hawkinson's usage has been muted this year too, and Amendola had just 15% of the air yards in those games. So I think that means that Matthew Stafford is firmly on the map as a lower salary quarterback play at $7,300. Galladay and Jones, I think Galladay is oversalaried, but still one of the best plays on the slate, which is weird, but salaries are kind of fake this week. So Galladay, Jones, high-level tournament plays. So I am looking to get in on the Lions with the health trending up. How are you viewing this offense specifically in this game?
Yeah, I liked Stafford last week. I liked this offense last season. And with Galladay back, we talk about this a lot, but having a star receiver out opens up volume but hurts an offense, and I feel like that doesn't always get as much attention as it should. Getting him back in this game is fantastic. All the betting trends are on the over here. This is going to be, I think it's like a lock to go over. It just feels that way because of the pace here for Arizona and everything. And I don't know. I've been trying to figure out my favorite way to stack it.
We're talking about that in the bookmaker section. Okay. I'm going to ask you for your favorite stack, but it's a fun game. I agree. So we'll talk about that in a second. But first, okay.
No, I just like Marv hasn't had a lot of downfield work yet. I feel like that'll somehow change with Galladay taking attention away from him as well.
I agree. I hope so, at least, because I'm going to use Marv, so I hope so. Yeah. Another week of the NFL season down means another millionaire made as a result of FanDuel's biggest NFL tournament, the Sunday Million. If you missed out on the first 2 weeks of the season, don't worry. The stage is set for you to play for a big payday in Week 3 for just $4.44. That's nuts. You can enter the Week 3 NFL Sunday Million and compete for your share of the $2.75 million prize pool, including a $1 million first place prize. With 13 games on the slate and superstars like Russell Wilson, Zeke Elliott, and it says Dalvin Cook in this read. I'm going to veto that one and we'll say Miles Sanders on the schedule. There is no shortage of big-name fantasy players to build your lineups around. For more details, visit FanDuel.com or download the FanDuel app today. Eligibility restrictions apply. Let's dive into the bookmaker info for this slate. As mentioned, 2 potential shootouts on the board. We're going to talk through both of them now, and I will ask you for your favorite game stack in each at the same time. We'll start things off here with the slightly higher total at Seahawks versus Cowboys. It's at 55.5. 69% of the money is on the over here, so people don't think it's too high. The Seahawks are 5-point favorites after opening at 4.5. It seems pretty obvious why this one is fun. Seahawks are letting Russ cook. The Cowboys are running at a crazy fast pace. If you look at Football Outsiders and see just seconds per play, they are 4 seconds faster than every other team in football right now, which is awesome. So this is a great game. First of all, though, do you have any reservations about stacking this one, or are we just good to go?
Good to go.
Cool.
I can play both quarterbacks. I can play – I know where the ball's going. Even with Dallas, when it's a little more dispersed, I still know where it's going. So, no reservations.
All right. Favorite game stack here. What are you seeing?
So I always have to keep in mind. I feel like I trend to. I don't put running backs in my favorite game stacks often for some reason.
Okay.
Probably stupid, but I'm going to do it here. No, I'm not. My favorite game stack is Russ, Lockett, Gallup, and Dalton Schultz.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I like that. My favorite is Russ. I like the home quarterbacks in general, so yes. It's tough for me to not go Russ. I love Dak, but I love Russ more. Mm-hmm. Russ, Lockett, We're both on Lockett over Metcalf. I think that's opposite of public. I'll talk to you about that in a second. But I have Lockett over Metcalf too. So I'm going to go Russ, Carson, Lockett, Zeke, Lamb.
So everybody
totally going all in. I tend to shy away from like full on onslaught game stacks just because FanDuel is such a touchdown dependent site that if Chris Carson scores, that means that potentially Russell Wilson is not scoring and potentially Tyler Lockett's not scoring. But like I think it's okay here because there could be so many points. So I'm going to go with that. If I were to lop off one person from that stack, it would be Carson. But I think Chris Carson's an elite level like pivot from the Seahawks passing game here.
Yeah.
We have Lockett. We both have Lockett over Metcalf. You tell me why, and then I'll tell you why I have that.
I took some notes here. Well, I think overall what it comes down to is Lockett has a higher floor because he is not as dependent on downfield targets. Metcalf gets more downfield work than Tyler Lockett, and more specifically, Metcalf doesn't get quite as many like bunny targets to get him going. So I think from a floor perspective, Tyler Lockett's better, and usually I'm okay with the lower salary of two guys, but if that's going to dictate popularity, I'm okay pivoting from that sense toward the receiver with the higher salary. So
well, it's not even the salary. It's also the fact that DK Metcalf just destroyed Stephon Gilmore's soul in a primetime game that everyone watched. So like, if we're talking roster rates between these two guys, like if you told me that DK Metcalf had twice as much popularity as Tyler Lockett, I'd be kind of surprised, but I wouldn't be that surprised. I think that's the way I'd view it.
Yeah, maybe. I'm trying to find him on FanShare. They didn't
trying to find Lockett or Metcalf.
Metcalf didn't come up on the first page that I saw.
How?
It is loading.
How?
Yeah, let's just vamp a little more. I'll try to figure it out. Metcalf.
This is
3 tags. Metcalf has 3 tags. I put some tied for 54th.
This is not going to end this way, by the way. But
no. But
does Lockett have any?
Lockett also 3.
Okay.
They're outside the top 50, and that was on the first page. So.
Okay. So I still think Metcalf will be more popular just because of the Sunday night thing. Like he was awesome. Like there's a reason to be more popular. He's awesome, but I prefer to go Lockett.
Yeah, I mean, not to. I'm just. This is definitely check out FanShare Sports, but the top guys are like all the value running backs.
Yeah, not that's
the
further
opposite way that I
cements.
would play it.
That further cements me in just paying up. Cements me. Favorite Cowboy receiver.
I have this jotted down as well. My cash priority, if it's like a single lineup, it's still Amari Cooper, number 1, then CeeDee Lamb, then Michael Gallup. But for tournaments, it's going to be Gallup, Cooper, Lamb in that order.
I think I have Amari first for tournaments just because I think CeeDee Lamb is going to be among the most popular plays in the slate. Amari is also in a range where he is above both Lockett and Metcalf. He's the highest salary receiver in this game. He is between Keenan and Allen Robinson, who I'd expect to both carry at least some popularity. So I feel like Amari, I know Gallup will be less popular. I can guarantee you that. So Gallup makes sense. But I think Amari, with his usage being as good as it has been, kind of want to go there. Like if I have a single lineup, I'm going to stack this game. But I think Amari might be number 1 for me. I'm going to use all 3.
Gallup surprisingly leads in tags so far.
It's very weird. Is the sentiment good? Because I feel like the sentiment that I've seen of Michael Gallup is not overly positive.
100% positive on 6 tags.
All right.
Last week I closed this out, but
I had Gallup in my single entry lineup last week.
Gallup I think was like 11, Lamb was like 9, and Amari was like 18 in the Sunday Million or something like that.
I would bet that Lamb is number 1 this week.
I wouldn't be surprised. So, I mean, I like all of them. Realistically, I should put Cooper number 1 in GPPs because of the volume. It's just more Gallup's underperformed. He gets a lot of downfield work, 17.9 yard average target depth for him. So if we're looking for like the the most under the radar. I assumed was going to be Michael Gallup, but if it is,
I would still assume that despite the tags. I'll say that. Okay.
Yeah.
Other shootout here is Arizona. Arizona facing Detroit. The total here is 54.5. It opened at 53. And helpfully, the spread is tightened because we want a back and forth affair. The Cardinals open as 6-point favorites, but that is shortened to 5.5. There is a lot of money coming in on the Cardinals, so it'll likely go back to 6. But regardless, this is encouraging. Where do you view this game for stacking relative to Dallas-Seattle? If you have a single entry lineup, are you stacking Dallas-Seattle or Arizona-Detroit?
I really should go Dallas and Seattle, I think.
I think I'm going to go with this one because it's indoors.
Look, we're just picking nits, and I said I think this one goes over for sure. The odds that I think a game between Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott just tanks. I feel like
the Lions do ruin a lot of fun things.
If there's a blowout, it's going to be Arizona over.
Very fair. I will say though, I'm going to stack both in a single entry line.
Yeah,
I'm going to have why don't we have both? This is a great week for Superflex, by the way, which you can play on FanDuel. So I'd recommend that. I think.
What's your favorite stack?
It's really hard for me to say no to Kyler's rushing. Yes. He's averaging 11.5 rush attempts per game this year, which is like double what he had last year. 11.5 or 10.5, one of the two. That's amazing. Great matchup. He's had 2 difficult matchups so far, and now we get to see him against a bad defense. Like, that's really fun. So I am going to go Kyler, Kenyon Drake, DeAndre Hopkins. Probably run it back with Marv because of the salary.
Was that it?
Yeah.
That was mine.
Oh, really? So I think Kenyon Drake, like I was talking about Chris Carson being a great pivot off the Seahawks passing game. Kenyon Drake has gotten a lot of buzz this week, at least in fantasy circles, but it's kind of one of those situations where I'm not sure everyone will buy in despite that buzz. Like Aaron Jones got some buzz last week, but people didn't really buy into him. I could see that being similar to Kenyon Drake this week, just because the fantasy output this year has been mediocre, and like he has lost some passing game work to Chase Edmonds. Like there are reasons for it, but like this defense is real bad. So, like I mentioned before, if I decide to go with Russell Wilson as my single entry quarterback, I might lock in Kenyon Drake and stack him with Jones or Galladay in order to get a stack of this game. I think that if I'm not using Murray, then Kenyon Drake becomes kind of a priority for me. I don't know.
Yeah, I think if you're voting this works even in a cash game, but like if a single entry or like a 3 entry, probably pick one of these games to stack and then do mini stacks of the other.
Yeah, I agree.
So I think it's kind of a no-brainer this week with a lot of your lineup construction, with Jonathan Taylor giving you a lot of value just for, he's underpriced for sure.
Just lock button him. Like, so, don't think too much about this one. Jerick McKinnon had a 61-yard rush against the Jets last week on 3rd and 31. Like, I know Jerick McKinnon's better than all other running backs in football.
Yes,
but Jonathan Taylor might be second. So
Yeah. So I think, I think that you can just kind of stack both of these games. The main differentiator, I think, between the two are I believe in both quarterbacks more for Dallas and Seattle, and for Arizona and Detroit. I can't really touch the Detroit running backs. I don't love the tight ends. I'll use Dan Arnold, but
better.
I have fewer options, I think.
Yeah.
So
I think that's fair. But just Murray and Stafford are both really fun. So I might just go split down the middle between if I have 10 lineups, I'll probably just do five of each quarterback. Or not, sorry, that doesn't make sense. I will make sure I have all 4 quarterbacks in those 10.
You'll probably do 3 Russ, 2 Dak, 3 Kyler, 2 Stafford.
100%. The third highest total on the board is, weirdly, the Vikings versus the Titans. It's up to 48.5, despite opening at 45.5. 52% of the money is now on the under. So it's probably going to stick at 48.5 if I had to guess. But it's really weird to me. The Titans are 13th in pace. The Vikings are 28th. I know the Vikings defense is bad, so I do like Derrick Henry for tournaments here, but am I missing something in not being in on this game?
So this one I'm struggling with a lot, similar to you, but they're both top 11 offenses based on numberFire's metrics through 2 weeks. The defenses are like below average, so I kind of get it from that standpoint, but it's the third worst combined pace matchup on the slate. So I don't think it's significantly worse than any of the other games. Do I think it should be out ahead of the pack in terms of total? I don't. But again, the betting trends are not as promising as the total implies. So I feel like it should just be in that mix of all these other games, not necessarily standing out ahead of any of the others.
Yeah, Henry's a good tournament play. Corey Davis works at 53. Johnny's fine. I might not get there. Like, I don't whatever. But Davis is fine. It's just everything else is bad. The Patriots check in with the fourth highest total on the slate at 27. It's behind the Seahawks, Cardinals, and Colts. They're facing the Raiders, and that's a great defense for us to target, but I'm also expecting a pretty low pace here. The Raiders are 28th in early down first half pass rate. That's according to Sharp Football Stats. The Patriots are dead last in that number. So as a result of that, they're both outside the top 20 in pace. So Cam obviously is going to grade out as a good play because it's rushing, because of the implied total, because of the matchup. But I would say for me, he's behind the 4 quarterbacks and 2 shootouts. I'd put Josh Allen ahead of him because I expect that game to be more back and forth and has a lot of similar attributes to Cam. And I'm having a hard time getting excited about anybody else here. What about you?
Yeah, I mentioned this game has like the biggest discrepancy on money and tickets on the over in the sense that for the amount of tickets that there are and amount of just sheer bets placed on the over, the money's not really tracking. So it suggests that it's probably not going to hit the over. I have pace concerns as well. I'm not as down on the Raiders offense as I historically have been. It's not like it's kind of one way to stack it or very few ways to stack it. I think you can probably play Cam Newton without any of his receivers if you want. It's just not really that enticing to me, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's because I just don't expect the Raiders to keep up. And so like my favorite bet of the week this week for covering the spread was this game, the under. So I just don't expect the Raiders to keep up, and that lowers me on Cam. So I don't know, man. It's obviously none of the running backs are in play. Edelman would be in play if I expected the Raiders to keep pace, but I don't. Like Edelman, the odds that Edelman gets you 6 catches for 100 yards and a touchdown are pretty high. Like he could totally do that, but is he going to get me 6 for 145 and 2 touchdowns, which DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Amari Cooper could get me? Not that high. So I like the floor on Edelman, don't like the ceiling, and that's a big reason I'm not as high in this game. Weather is worth mentioning because we have some potential weather concerns in Seattle for the Seahawks and the Cowboys. Current wind projections are at 16 miles per hour. There's a chance of rain. I don't care if it rains, but the wind would be interesting depending on the direction. If it's a crosswind, it doesn't matter because the stadium is constructed in a way where that'd be fine. If it's blowing through the end zone, that's more open. So Chris Allen does a really good weather report for numberFire every week, goes up on Friday. He mentions the dynamics of each stadium. So I'd recommend Chris's write-up. I think it's Chris Allen FFWX on Twitter. Check out his stuff. Follow him on Twitter. I wouldn't freak out yet, but it is worth monitoring. Other games with slight wind concerns are Raiders, Patriots, Washington versus Cleveland, Rams, Bills, but nothing of major concern outside of the Seahawks, Cowboys. Just check out Chris's write-up on Friday on numberFire.com. With that said, let's dive into our position-by-position breakdown for this week. Brandon, who are you targeting at quarterback on FanDuel for week number 3?
I'm going to go with Kyler Murray. $8,400 salary. Love the game. 85% of the betting action is on the over. Kenny Galladay's return would do wonders for this one for me. Murray's passing efficiency hasn't been great, but he hasn't been terrible either. Just a little bit below league average based on numberFire's metrics. Picked up the downfield rate in week 2, about 24% from week 1. Week 1's 10% downfield rate, 8 and 13 rushing attempts, 67, 91 rushing yards, 3 total rushing touchdowns. Obviously not expecting a rushing touchdown every single week, but with that rushing and the yardage, I mean, that's like an extra 1 to 2 passing touchdowns for Murray. So I think I'd probably put him maybe number one overall this week. I mean, Detroit's been.
So like for a cash game lineup, you go Kyler?
It might be Russ, but it would be Kyler if not.
Right now it's Kyler for me. So
yeah. Number two, I know we just talked about why we're not really in on this game, but I still like Cam Newton. $7,700 salary. Among all of the options below the 8,000 range, I think it's Newton and Stafford pretty much like in their own tier above everybody else, and I don't really want to recommend someone I'm not going to be significantly heavy on, but the rushing for Newton is just nuts right now. He has 11 and 15 carries for 47 and 75 yards, 2 touchdowns in each game. The passing efficiency's been there, 58% success rate for him. The Raiders coming off a short week, tight game there. I don't really think the salary is prohibitive enough to want to like spend down and be like, I need to save at quarterback. I think there are maybe 5 or 6 quarterbacks really worth the salary this week, and then it's a whole lot of uncertainty from there. So I think Cam Newton, despite not loving the game, is still in a good spot.
So you'd have Cam over Josh Allen?
No.
Okay.
So Josh Allen, his salary is what, 81?
Yeah.
I think like that's significant enough to recommend Cam here and not just overlook Cam, and also not recommend only the highest salary quarterbacks. Right. But I think it's tell me your 2 loves and then I'll finish up.
So I got Russ. I'm just going to keep on using him until they force me not to from a salary perspective. Seahawks, they're actually doing the thing. They are up to 10th in early down pass rate in the first half, according to Sharp Football. They're facing a Dallas team that leads the league in pace, so it should be a tight game with a lot of scoring. I don't really care how popular Russ is. Popularity tends to be pretty flat at quarterback, so just give me Russ. My second one is Matthew Stafford, and I think that, again, the 4 quarterbacks in the 2 big games are my 4 favorite quarterbacks of the week. Matthew Stafford firmly in play for that. He is $7,300, so a pretty big discount from the other guys. He gets Kenny Golladay back this week, which means he should be able to throw the ball deep and throw the ball efficiently. We also weirdly saw Stafford run 5 times in week 1, which is more than he's run basically within the past 4 or 5 years. I don't want to react to that, but I think it's worth noting at least. So he kind of showed some juice to his legs, maybe that back is healthy. So I like Stafford at 73. I would go Josh Allen 5 at quarterback for this week. What about you?
Yeah, so the 4 from the big 2 games are my top 4. So I would rank them Kyler, Stafford, Dak, or Kyler, Wilson, Dak, Stafford, and then behind that it's Josh Allen and Cam.
The only potential switch I might have there is Stafford over Dak, but that might be getting too cute. So I think you're probably right.
I didn't want to get too cute and say I love.
No, you're right. You're right.
Carson Wentz this week. I don't.
No, I used him last week. Regrets. There were regrets. Running back. What do you have there?
Speaking of regrets, in last week, Derrick Henry, $8,200 salary. Definitely not a cash game play for me, despite the 48.5 point total here. But I mean, the total's high. The Titans are a 2.5 point favorite on the road. Henry's still at 33 adjusted opportunities per game. I think it's an elite bounce back spot after the letdown in week 2. He is 4th in adjusted opportunities per game. He's running some routes. I know he's never going to have a lot of receiving volume, but I think if everyone's off of Derrick Henry, he's a great tournament pivot. But 2 very much safer plays and cash game plays for me are Miles Sanders, $7,400 in salary for him in his week 2 return, 78% of the snaps, 34 adjusted opportunities, 7 of which were targets. That's an elite workload. Cincinnati's 19th against the rush, according to numberFire's metrics. They're 24th in success rate allowed to running backs as well. Love Miles, and then I love Jonathan Taylor at 6,700. Played 67% of the snaps, ran 63% of the routes, had 30 adjusted opportunities. I think that makes him game script proof, and obviously there shouldn't be a whole lot of game script concerns as a 10.5 point home favorite over the Jets.
I hope not.
Yeah, hope.
I pray for Philip Rivers and Frank Reich's like mental well-being that there are no game script concerns here.
Yeah, I think the only concern is the Jets are, through 2 weeks, a pretty good run defense, but I don't care because Taylor can catch the ball and it just doesn't matter.
Yeah. The Jets also allowed like an 81-yard touchdown to Raheem Mostert last week and then allowed another one on the exact same play. They got called back for holding. So you took my top two guys, Miles Sanders and Jonathan Taylor. Number 3 for me is Zeke Elliott after you account for salaries. He's my number 1 love here. We talked about this last week, but we want running backs in tight, high-scoring games, and Zeke checks those boxes, but he also gets us a ton of volume. He is tied for second on the main slate in adjusted opportunities per game. Miles Sanders is actually 1, so that's why you use Miles Sanders in cash and tournaments. He may not have Tyron Smith back because he didn't practice Wednesday, but they fared fine without him last week, so Zeke is the number 1 running back for me this week. If I'm not going with like Zeke, Jonathan Taylor, and Miles Sanders, I think that Kenyon Drake is number 4 for me. I prefer him. I prefer Sanders and Taylor, obviously, but I think that Drake is a good number 4. He hasn't gotten big work this year, but he's still at 22 adjusted opportunities per game. He's produced despite tough matchups against San Francisco and Washington, and he's in a much, 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 much better spot this week. He's only $6,500. So I want to find out what Kenyon Drake's popularity will be in tournaments and go overweight on that because he is an awesome play. Third, I'll go Mike Davis. I think he actually is the number 6 running back for me, after Henry, who you had as well. But of the value guys, Davis is the one I think has the easiest path to a 20-point game because he had 8 targets last week. He ran 17 routes. 4 of those were from the slot and 1 was out wide. He's facing the Chargers, which is a really tough matchup, but he's $6,000. He should get volume. There's at least a path there. So, I'm going to have pretty concentrated exposure running back this week. So even though Davis is in my loves and potentially my top 6 at running back, actually Chris Carson I probably should have talked about. Davis might be 7 behind Carson. I might not have more than 15% exposure.
Can I ask you about Antonio Gibson?
No.
Okay.
I don't think they're going to score enough points. He also still is losing red zone work.
That's true.
No, it's fair to ask. I just don't want to. What about you?
Probably not. I don't hate the salary, though.
Yeah.
And if I stack that game, he's going to be part of it. So.
Okay. Yeah, that's fair. Let's move on to wide receiver. Who you got there?
I'm going to go with Nuke. I don't talk up expensive, high-salaried wide receivers often, but I think he fits, especially relative to all of the other wide receivers on this slate. My initial sims have Hopkins with a huge lead and, the odds that he finishes as a top 5 receiver on the slate, just because there's a lot of uncertainty behind him. He has 32% of the targets, 26% of the air yards for good passing offense. The reason the air yard share is low is because Christian Kirk does get a lot of air yards. Kyler's stolen some touchdowns as well. So some of those maybe go back to DeAndre soon. Just love the game. And with Jonathan Taylor, I should have done the math, but if you combine these two in terms of salary, they look a lot more appealing combined than just spending 85 for Hopkins. But my second love is Tyler Lockett. It's kind of a coin flip between Lockett and Metcalf. You and I both prefer Lockett right now. They are getting fed, both of them. They're playing heavy snaps. They are combining for 48% of Russell Wilson's targets, 75% of the air yards. That makes them really easy to stack. I would prioritize Lockett for the safer targets. Metcalf is much more volatile with the downfield rates, but I would put Lockett in any type of lineup this week. My third love, maybe it's too cute, but I don't think so. Michael Gallup, $5,700 salary. I think you can play the chalky games without being super chalky. Again, even last week, very few wide receivers were popular enough to feel like you needed to full fade them or anything like that. So I assumed Gallup would be the odd man out. Right now, the sentiment is not that, but I think it'll probably even out by Sunday. Gallup 11.5% rostered in the Sunday Million last week. Cooper 17%. CeeDee Lamb 9.9%. And again, so on these bigger slates, you don't really see too many receivers be so popular that you have to avoid them. Gallup at 57 has that kind of check mark where he's a high ADOT guy in a shootouts. He's not at home, but I still think that we can look at Gallup despite an 11% target share. Maybe that's stupid, but he's running 96% of the routes on average. I think a big game is inevitable for Michael Gallup soon.
If you play snaps in a shootout, you're in play. I don't care what your usage is. Like, unless you're Chris Hogan. Like, if you play snaps in a shootout, you will be on my rosters. Michael Gallup will be on my rosters. My first love is Allen Robinson. I don't usually get to him because I usually hate the game environment because the Bears' defense is pretty good. Mitchell stinks, but it's a spot where the Bears will have to throw quite a bit, and I can get in on this for Robinson this week. He's had 29% of the overall targets, 47% of the deep targets so far this year, and he hasn't come through yet, but like you said, in your trend, the volume is there, the matchup is there, this game is indoors. Robinson at 69 will be in my lineups this week. I think he's a cash game eligible play. Again, it's the opportunity cost of like, do I go with him or go with Amari Cooper to get more exposure to the shootouts? But Robinson's there, as is Keenan Allen. I also love Marvin Jones. He hasn't gotten good volume with Kenny Golladay out so far, but now Golladay can open up the offense. And as mentioned, Jones got high leverage targets last year when Golladay was healthy. I expect this team to move the ball. I expect them to be efficient. And Jones is $6,100. I think it is a good time to get in on him. Golladay at 75 also in play, coming off the injury because of when the news has come out. I think that increases my confidence in using him. My third love is CeeDee Lamb. We kind of talked about how he'll be popular this week. Let's talk about why. Part of that is because the Seahawks have been shredded by slot guys so far. They allowed $179 to Julian Edelman, 114 to Russell freaking Gage. It's a small sample, but Lamb's usage says that he can do that because he's got 18% of the targets, 20% of the deep targets, 17% of the red zone targets, but it's in elite offense. So I'm okay with that. I will say Deshaun Jackson is an amazing tournament play. And if I have one lineup, I might go Djax over Lamb just because of the expected popularity gap between the two. So I just want to throw out there Deshaun Jackson is a really good play. And I am inclined to use him aggressively. What could go wrong?
Nothing,
right?
It's going to be a week too where if you're stacking these two top games, just don't really look at your placement because they're both in the afternoon. So you won't be scored a lot of points in the 1 o'clock slate.
We're also getting a puppy on Sunday, so I can use the puppy as like an emotional crutch when Carson Wentz overthrows Deshaun Jackson for the 15th time in the game. So that helps me as well. So I'm looking forward to that. Tight end, who do you have there, Brandon?
So tight end's a little tricky. It's kind of flat. I don't really want to get up to Darren Waller coming off a short week and a huge game. I assume he'll get some more attention from New England's defense. So I'm looking a little bit below that. I love Evan Ingram's workload, just don't love the game for this week for them. So I'm going to go with Hayden Hurst at 5,700. He is at home. He's favored, solid, at least for this slate, implied team total of 25 points. Just a 14% target share, but does have 3 downfield looks, a red zone target, an average of 84% of the routes for Hayden Hurst. And my second love, Dalton Schultz, $4,900 salary, led the team in targets last week with 10, which was 20% of the targets. I don't expect that to stick, especially with the receivers, but if you're a tight end who can get volume, and again, that's even a good target share, not just the sheer volume, which helps adjust for Dak's volume in week 2. If you can lead your team or get close to that as a tight end, that is rare and that's enticing to me. And if it's coming from a quarterback as good as Dak, love that. If it's coming in a game with as many expected points as I have this week, that's also very good. Passing volume should be there. Played 70% of the snaps last week, 74% of the routes. So I think for the salary, it's just really easy to like Dalton Schultz, but I do prefer your first love.
I'm assuming that Schultz is 5th among the Cowboys guys for you, right? Behind Zeke and the 3 receivers?
Yeah, he's more of an afterthought, but I think if you only have, if you spend down at Schultz, if you take the savings with Jonathan Taylor, you have a lot open for you.
I agree. Yeah, I'll use him, but I think that I'd agree. I'd have him 5th. My first love is Dallas Goedert. The salary is near guys with roles that are a lot flimsier than his, so I kind of adore him. He has a 20% target share this year, only 13% of the deep targets. And if you look at his red zone share, it's 50%. That is on 4 total throws because the Eagles suck. But it's an elite matchup here with the Bengals. I think Goddard's a cash game play. I think he's awesome for tournaments too, and I think that he's just way lower salary than he should be. My second love is Dan Arnold. He hasn't done much yet, but he gets us access to a high-scoring game at $4,300, similar to Schultz, minus the volume, because why not? But it seems like Max Williams will be back out there this week. He missed last week. Williams, I don't think, was on the injury report on Wednesday, but we go back to week 1 when Max Williams did play. Arnold played just 55% of the snaps, but he still ran routes on 32 of 42 dropbacks. 10 of those routes were from the slot, 6 were out wide, and 2 were in the backfield. That's pretty fun usage. So Logan Thomas at 49 works. Mo Alley Cox works. But if I want exposure to a high-scoring game, give me Dan Arnold. I find him pretty intriguing. Are you in on Arnold or no?
Just for stacks. Okay. I think it's one of those spots where I need to get a little bit higher, get up to Goddard.
Okay, fair enough. I agree. That's very fair. Defense, what do you got there?
Tampa Bay, $3,800 salary, facing the Jeff Driscoll offense. Driscoll was stacked. He was stacked 6 times on 40 dropbacks, lost 0.12 passing expected points per dropback. That's terrible. Threw it deep a lot. 12.4 yard average target depth, 29% downfield rate. Tampa is 8th against the pass so far this year when adjusted for opponents. Should be a lot of havoc plays. We haven't really talked at all about that game, but my favorite is just Tampa's defense.
I agree. They're going to get pressure on him. Driscoll is a wild man. Like he's a weird dude. He's perfect. He's perfect for using defenses against. I like Tampa Bay. Cleveland is my love. Washington has been bad, and they just lost like their one good offensive player, not named Terry McLaurin, with Brandon Sheriff. So Cleveland's defensive line is going to just destroy things here. I do like Tampa Bay. Cleveland's $3,900. They're at home, game with really good pace, which I like for defense. I'm not entirely opposed to Atlanta. Like they're kind of banged up, and they kind of not kind of they suck. But they're facing Mitch, so we're there. Indy is not a team we mentioned. I think they're going to get a lot of pressure on Jameis Darnold. But they're $4,800.
Yeah, we never mentioned high salary defenses, but
I think that Indy works. I am okay with using guys like Will Fuller, but I would consider the Pittsburgh defense. Deshaun has kind of trickled back into his heavy sack ways a little bit this year, which is concerning. So I don't mind that. Philadelphia should see a lot of pass attempts against Joe Burrow. They're another defense that's good, but I just want to stack pass attempts, and I'll get that. So you've got some options this week, but among the lower salaried ones, I would say Tampa Bay and Cleveland are pretty clear, the 1 and 2 for me. That is all the time that we have for today. Brandon, any final thoughts for you on this slate before we close up shop?
I would say don't get too worried about the 2 big games because it's a 13-game slate. People will try to differentiate, so that'll bring down popularity for everyone. But outside of that, maybe focus on 2 or 3 games. Don't try to play them all. Just try to pick the ones that you think are best outside of the 2 obvious spots.
It's a good week to have a tight core, I think, is my thought for this week. And that means loading up on the established running backs. I can't say studs or like high salary guys because like Jonathan Taylor and Miles Sanders are way too low salaried. So focus on the established running backs and stack those 2 games, and you should be okay. That is all the time that we have for today. Pretty fun podcast and a pretty fun slate. We're back with you once again on Monday to wrap up things and recap what went down, all the big usage trends and everything. So make sure you are subscribed to the numberFire Daily Fantasy Podcast feed wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, leave us a rating and review on Apple Podcasts as well. We are back again tomorrow at 3:30 p.m. Eastern to do our snake draft live on air. It's with me, Brandon, and JJ Zachariason. It's at 3:30 on the FanDuel YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, and Periscope pages, so make sure you subscribe there. We also have our recap podcast live on YouTube Monday at 9 a.m. Brandon, if people have questions for you on Twitter, where can they find you there?
I'm at Gadula13, GDULA13.
And I am at Jim Sannes, JIMSANNES. You can also follow the FanDuel Podcast Network at FanDuel Podcast. Big thank you to Calvin Theobald, our video producer, for running the video side of things here today. Thank you, Cal, as always. And thank you to everyone for tuning in. Good luck. with your Week 3 NFL DFS lineups. We'll talk to you again next week. This has been the Heat Check Fantasy Podcast powered by numberFire.